InPicardysFields, Book 1 of the Resistance Girls series by Hannah Byron. Chapter 1. Two Men, Agnès, Paris, 20th of March, 1918. The late afternoon sun set ablaze the upper windows of the operation room in the Lycée Pasteur, creating a golden aureole over the electric lamps that illuminated the wounded soldier on the table and the medical staff around him. There was a concentrated silence in the room, interrupted only by the faint hissing of the Heidbrink anesthetizer gas machine and the short commands Professor Alan Bell issued from behind his surgical mask. Harmonic scalpel, retractor, lancet, which were promptly handed to him by the American nurse at his side. From the other side of the table, the young assistant doctor Agnès de Saint-Aubin followed the surgeon's swift and practiced hands as he removed the bullet from the patient's neck. There was an intense, steady focus in her blue eyes. Voilà, another 5mm bullet from those bloody G98s. For a moment, Dr. Bell studied the round ball between his tweezers before depositing it in a metal tray that the nurse held ready. It clattered, metal hitting metal. More oxygen. Antiseptics. The surgeon had already moved to the next stage. Agnès knew how complicated and dangerous this gunshot wound was. It had hit the young French soldier at high velocity, and the trajectory of the bullet had damaged his nervous system. He was bleeding profusely and was greatly in need of a blood transfusion, which another nurse was hastily preparing. With the strong medicinal odour of the chlorine prickling her nostrils, Agnès let her gaze rest for a moment on the young man's still profile, the Roman nose, the dark, almost girlish eyelashes over his closed lids, black locks of matted hair emerging from under his operation cap. He still retained a vague glow of health under his ashen colour. How old was he? 17, 18? What had he dreamt of achieving in this war? And what would become of him now? Stitch him up, Dr. de Saint-Aubin, and when you're done, come and see me in the canteen. Agnès startled. Her eyes met those of her American professor, and she thought she saw a softening in the steel-grey gaze. Of course, Professor Bell, right away. Her words were more straightforward than her voice, but she hastened around the table to take up his position next to the stout nurse. The head surgeon had already removed the white cap from his brown curls and was now snapping off his surgical gloves. With his gaze still on Agnès, he gave his last orders to the nurse. Nurse Simpson, assist the new doctor. Make sure you check her multilayer sutures. Nurse Belliard, blood transfusion, now. Yes, Professor Bell? Both nurses answered, while Agnès took a deep breath and ceased following the movements of her professor, to give all her attention to the young patient on the table. His life, not hers. She heard him disappear through the swinging doors that flapped for a couple of times before falling still. Agnès took another deep breath, steadying her hands before she said in a subdued voice, Needle. The American nurse, ready to exert a maternal preponderance over this inexperienced doctor, instantly handed her the bent needle and thread. In an upbeat voice, she added, You'll do all right, doctor. This kind nudge gave Agnès the confidence she needed, and she completed the complicated sutures under the older woman's scrutiny, knowing she was doing the best job at stitching she had done so far. While she was washing her hands at the enamel sink in the kitchen unit next to the operation room, she heard the screeching wheels of the hospital bed as the patient was wheeled to the recovery room. She hoped he would live and convalesce completely, but knew his chances were slim. So many had already died under her hands. She reminded herself of the next step in the process. No more thinking of the patient at this point. She should be proud. She had done well, blocking her emotions during the operation and especially during her own suturing. She was making progress. Professor Bell's lessons were finally sinking in. She was developing a neutral attitude to suffering and complications. Agnes smiled at herself. She could hear him say it in that American tongue of his, pronouncing his R's and long drawling vowels, an English so exotically different from that of her Oxford English tutor, Dr. de Saint-Aubin. There is no difference between a male and a female surgeon. Emotions simply stay out of the operation room. Always. Drying her hands on the blocked tea towel, she wondered what his reason was for summoning her to the canteen. They had never met outside the lecture room or the operation theatre, so Agnes felt uneasy. She was mastering the work, simply doing the job, identical to cutting and stitching dummies during the lectures. Truth was that her stomach still felt queasy after every operation. No matter that Professor Bell had told her she was cut from a special cloth. That female surgeons were going to be the stars of the 20th century. He had taken it upon himself to personally supervise her surgical progress after she obtained her Diplôme de l'État de Docteur en Médecine from l'Université de Sorbonne in the spring of 1914. First at the American hospital in Paris, and now, as part of his operation team, at the Lycée Pasteur, nothing pointed to him being dissatisfied with her. So, what now? She suppressed a sudden thrill that he might ask her out. There had never been anything but a professional contact between them. And he was, of course, almost a decade older than she was, somewhere in his early 30s. Silly goose. He's probably married, although he doesn't wear a wedding band. But who does in the operation room? As she smoothed her springy blonde hair on top of her head and gave her full lips a dash of coral lipstick, she noticed how pale and tired she looked, with dark rings under her eyes, her face pale from the rationing and working long hours. How would he ever notice her if she looked so mousy? To add some colour to her cheeks, she gave them both a soft pinch and then gazed at her own eyes. They were an intense soft blue. Robin's egg blue, Papa called them. If only she looked a little darker, more French. Which was a ridiculous wish, as everyone always complimented her on her pale, elf-like look. But the Americans loved the dark-haired French girls. She saw it all around her. Smoothing the dark green pleats of her day dress, Agnès hastened through the long corridors of the Lycée Pasteur. Originally built as a school for Neuilly-sur-Seine, but now temporarily turned into an extension of the American War Hospital. Because the ongoing war demanded more emergency beds every day temporarily. It had been going on for close to 4 years now, and it only seemed to get worse. Outside in the Lycée's courtyard, the blue vans of the American Ambulance Field Service came and went in parade, with never a lull in the arrival of wounded men from the front. But for today, her day at the operation table was over. Before entering the canteen, Agnès paused for a moment. Dr. Bell had always been honest with her, so there was no reason to think she had muddled things up. Chin up, she told herself. The hospital canteen was the only place in the 1,600-bed hospital that offered a relatively warm space to relax and recuperate. It was a large, whitewashed room with a high-beamed ceiling and a row of tall alcove windows along the Boulevard Dinkelmann, letting in plenty of light during the day. Around the clock, the canteen was a beehive of comings and goings, filled to the ridge with the smoke of hundreds of pipes and cigarettes, the chatter of voices, the clinking of cutlery, and the scraping of wooden chairs over the sanded floorboards. On both sides of the long tables, the electric bulbs above them looming as oversized pearls, A variety of nationalities sat side by side. Medical staff, ambulance drivers, recovering soldiers, they all shared just one goal: to win the war against Imperial Germany. Agnès saw Alan Bell standing near the soup table, engrossed in animated conversation with one of the pretty American Red Cross nurses. His hand touched her arm lightly at times, and he nodded at her, while the brunette gazed up at him, recounting what must have been a funny story as they both laughed heartily. Hesitantly, Agnès approached, not sure whether she should interrupt their conversation, but Alan spotted her and gestured to her to come closer. "Dr. de Saint-Aubin, come and meet Elsie Gamble. She's from Chicago, like me. We grew up on the same street. Now, isn't that a coincidence?" Agnès noted how he called the nurse by her first name while addressing her formally. But when she shook the girl's soft white hand, Elsie smiled warmly. "So nice to meet you, Dr. de Saint-Aubin. I won't tell you all the good things Al's just told me about you." Wink, wink. "I'm ever so impressed to meet a female surgeon in the flesh. But right now, I should get my lazy behind out of the way, as my shift's starting in 10 minutes. With an amicable slap to Alan's arm, she moved away. Her round hips swayed slightly under her white nurse's coat. A fact that did not go unnoticed by the soldiers in the room, whose weary faces brightened whenever they caught a glimpse of female beauty. Just like the Americans and Brits liked the French girls. The Frenchmen were infatuated with American nurses, who were known to be ever so carefree and spontaneous. "Sit over there." Alan pointed to a table in the corner that was slightly less crowded. "I'll get us something. Would you like some soup or toast with scrambled eggs?" "Just a café au lait and a biscuit, please." Alan looked at her with one dark eyebrow raised. "Still not steady on the nerves? I won't insist. But after 8 hours at the operation table, you do need to eat a little more than a cookie. Dr. de Saint-Aubin." "I will, in a minute. But first coffee. And please, call me Agnès." She watched him order himself a full plate of beef bourguignon and a large mug of tea. He moved with such ease, such composure, speaking French to the fat cook as if he had lived in her country all his life. It had become second nature to her, minutely studying his expressions and movements. But so far it had only been a logical process of learning from him in the operating theatre. As this was the first time seeing him interact with others outside the medical sphere, it was a novelty to her. But she studied it all just the same. He came towards her, balancing his food and her coffee on the metal tray, and she noticed the smile had disappeared from his handsome face. "I'm ravenous," he announced. "I do have something important to tell you, but could it wait a couple of minutes until I've wolfed this down?" "Of course." Agnès stirred her coffee, steadying her queasy stomach against the strong smell of beef that wafted her way. She intentionally diverted her attention to other people at their table to stop herself from scrutinizing him. When he had put down his fork and wiped his mouth on the linen napkin, her eyes met his again. She was aware she must have looked puzzled, but she could not read his intentions. He seemed to be struggling with something, and for a moment her heart thumped in her throat. "I'll call you Agnès, if you agree to call me Alan." His voice had lost the professorial tone, but it was flat and devoid of emotion. She nodded, waiting. He took a sip of his tea, as if weighing his words. "I wanted to tell you that I'm leaving Lycée Pasteur to move to a base hospital at the front." She still did not reply, but looked down at her coffee cup to hide her disappointment. "There are 2 reasons for this, Agnès. The first is that I want to make a real difference in this war, to give it my all, saving lives where it matters most, And secondly, I want to study the major leaps in medical progress where they really happen. And that's at the front. The war is proving to be a great teacher to us doctors." With some difficulty, Agnes raised her head again. "Why are you telling me this?" He gave a short, dry laugh. "I didn't just want to disappear. It didn't seem right. You've been my student for 4 years, and I've been your practical supervisor for the past year. So, the time is right. You're ready to take over from me. You're a good surgeon, Agnes." "I want—" She started, but then stopped, diverting her gaze again. An awkward silence crept up between them. "I'd like some scrambled eggs on toast now." "Good choice." He jumped up, giving her space to collect her thoughts. Although she had seen dozens of Allied surgeons departing to the field hospitals closer to the front, it had not occurred to her that Alan might go as well. After all, he oversaw the entire operating team in Paris. But everything was changing. Maybe he was right. Maybe she wanted to go too, and be where she could make a real difference, help the heavy casualties, save lives on the spot. Agnes's brain worked hard. It was not the first time she had thought about going closer to the battlefields. When the war started, her father and she had made plans to turn their chateau near Roye into a field hospital, but the Germans had prevented that by seizing the castle during the First Battle of Picardy in September 1914. And since then, its medieval fate hung unknowingly in the air. Alan returned with her meal and suggested she take her turn eating while he smoked a cigarette. Having made her decision to ask him to take her with him, Agnes picked up her knife and fork. "You're not in a hurry." He waved his hand, dispersing the smoke. "No, not at all. Got all evening. I plan to take a walk along the Seine. Could do with some relative peace before the real madness starts. Care to come along?" Agnes smiled. "I'd love to." She had eaten a few bites and pushed her plate aside. Resting her elbows on the tablecloth, she asked in her quiet voice, "Can I come with you to the front?" For a moment he seemed baffled, then curtly said, "No," while extinguishing his cigarette in the overfull ashtray with a firm jab. But Agnes was not that easily pushed aside. "Why not, Alan?" Saying his Christian name was an unusual experience, but it felt invigorating. He jumped to his feet. "Let's take that walk, and I'll explain why." From the Lycée Pasteur, they walked along the Rue Perronnet in the direction of the Seine. The March sun had already sunk behind the tall buildings, and leaden clouds gathered in the sky signalled rain in the evening. They did not speak, and Agnes was painfully aware of Alan's proximity. The tall man by her side, who did his best to curb his big strides so she could keep up with him. He was at least 2 heads taller than she, and walked with that American swagger Agnes so admired in him and his countrymen. As if they still needed to secure their supremacy over the Wild West. Not knowing what to say, but dying to ask questions, she decided to remain quiet as well, telling herself to just enjoy the opportunity of being with him. When they reached the boulevard that ran along the Seine with busy traffic going both ways, taxis, private automobiles, army vehicles, ambulances, Alan turned to her. "Which way?" "I live 2 miles to the left, near the Pont de Puteaux. Would you like to go in that direction for a bit?" "You live near the Bois de Boulogne." He sounded surprised, then added with an endearing chuckle, "Ah, that's right, you're a baroness. Had quite forgotten that. Gosh, you Europeans. Truly never met so much old blood before in my life. Every other person I speak to is a viscount or an earl of something." Agnes bit her tongue, but decided not to tell him she was not a baroness by birth, but had been adopted. "Would you like to walk along the waterside?" she suggested. Sure. They descended the stone steps and went along the broad pavement, with boats and smaller barges gliding past in the diffuse afternoon light. The green spur of the Ile de la Jatte was to their right. Agnes breathed in deeply. She liked taking this route home, close to the river, after a long day in the operation room. There was a fresh breeze in every season here, and the pungent scent of the water, cool as a mountain stream, always livened her senses. The dark water rippled in miniature waves, sloshing against the quay when larger boats passed. Green patches of vegetation drifted by, and silver-finned fish skittered under the surface. They still walked in silence, each wrapped in their own thoughts. Agnès took regular, precise steps, her arms by her sides, her medical bag clutched in her right hand, while Alan, who walked hatless with his brown locks pushed away from his forehead, had his hands folded at his back. Just when Agnès wondered if she should break the silence because it was becoming awkward, he said evenly, "Listen, Agnès, I had it all worked out. You've trained under me long enough to lead the team at the lycée. That was my reason for waiting to go up north, to make sure you'd be ready." She was baffled by his words, but her heart swelled with pride at this promotion. "Thank you. I honestly didn't know you had so much confidence in me." "I trained you, remember?" Again, that chuckle she had never heard in the operation room. It made him sound younger, more boyish. True. She gave him a shy smile, her eyes catching the last of the evening light. "So, it would be rather inconvenient if you also decided to leave for the front. Dr. Davies could take charge." Alan seemed to ponder this for a moment. He might. "It's not a whim, Alan. I've been considering this ever since the war started." And she told him of the sad circumstances of Château de Saint-Aubin. He listened attentively, but shook his head. "I'm not your father, just your mentor and supervisor. But if I were your father, I would simply forbid it." The stern professorial tone was back. Agnès sighed. "I'm sure my father will be in total agreement with you. But what about the rumours that the Germans are considering a new offensive on the Western Front, now that Russia is no longer in the war? They could take Paris overnight, and I wouldn't be safe here either then. Then you could flee south, like everyone else will. As long as this wicked war goes on, nobody is safe anywhere," Agnès remarked bitterly. "But there's a difference between seeking danger and staying relatively safe." "The same goes for you." Agnès wondered how it was possible she was talking in this manner to her professor. But somehow their walking together in civilian clothes, with the bustle of her own city all around them, made her ignore the distance they had always carefully observed. And she could not bear the thought of never working with him again. She was not done learning from him. She wanted more than this, so she decided to try one more thing. "We're almost there. Would you care to come and meet my father, to see how he thinks about this ludicrous plan of mine?" She made it sound as light-hearted as she could. Alan glanced at his pocket watch and then looked at the sky where the clouds were thickening. "I think I ought to be." "Please, Alan." He glanced at her begging face, then shrugged his shoulders in a comical way. "Oh, all right then. I suppose I owe you something after all this time working together. If you want to fight 2 men, be my guest. Show us what you're worth." He grinned at her, and for a moment she felt incredibly close to him. They left the pathway along the Seine at the Pont de Puteaux, and after crossing the Boulevard de la Seine, Agnès directed them to a stately mansion on the waterfront. The dark green front door read in decorative golden lettering, "Baron Maximilien de Saint-Aubin et famille." As soon as she opened the door with her latchkey, the housekeeper, Madame Petit, appeared from the front parlour, looking questioningly at Agnès. "You're all right, Miss Agnès? You're very late." "Sure, Petipat. Everything's fine. This is Professor Bell. Is Papa home?" The ample-bosomed housekeeper nodded, straightening her massive black dress, and looked, slightly bewildered, from the young girl to the tall American, who was standing rather stiffly on the doormat. Yes, of course. Do come in, Professor Bell, welcome." Busying herself with making room for them in the parlour, puffing up cushions and rearranging chairs, she addressed the young Baroness, but secretly eyed Alan, giving Agnes inward glee at the effort the elderly woman was making at understanding what was going on. "The Baron is in his music room as usual," the housekeeper went on. "He was waiting for you, as he'll be going out tonight. Will you be going out as well, Miss Agnes?" "No, Petipat. It's been a long day afternoon shift tomorrow, but still early bed for me." She glanced up at Alan, wondering what would happen tomorrow. He had not told her if he was leaving straight away. "Now, I'll go and fetch your father, my girl." Moving as fast as her voluminous body allowed her, the housekeeper proposed before she disappeared in the hallway. "Do make yourselves at home, dears, and tell me what I can get you. Would you care for a sherry, Alan? Or maybe something stronger? My father wisely stocked his cellars before the war. We may run out of potatoes, but we've still got plenty of liquor." She giggled. "A sherry will be fine, Ma'am," Alan said politely. But as soon as the housekeeper had left, he lifted a quizzical eyebrow. "Petipat." "Oh, do sit down." Agnès laughed. "It's just my special name for her. She's been like a mother to me." "Ah, I see. So, your own mother?" Agnès nodded and hoped Alan would not probe any further in this sensitive matter. But after a while the silence hung heavily in the room, so she added timidly, "My mother died shortly after giving birth to me. I was raised by my father and Madame Petit, who has been with our family since the beginning of time." "So sorry to hear that." Alan's brow softened with empathy. "If it's any comfort to you, I also lost my mother, though I have some vague memories of her, as I was 4 at the time. My father remarried soon after, but I've never liked my stepmother, whom I was supposed to call mother as well, and, well, it's also influenced the relationship with my father." He stared wistfully at the blunt knives on the wall. Agnes's kind heart went out to him immediately. "My time to be sorry. At least I've had a doting dad. And of course Petipat, who's picked me up more times than I can remember." The air lifted, and she followed Alan's eyes as they took in the room. She wondered what he would make of it, and how different it certainly must be from his American house back home, with the parents to whom he did not feel close. As all the rooms in the de Saint-Aubin household, this one displayed a mishmash of styles, ranging from conservative classic to quirky exotic, very much like the owner himself. The downstairs parlour mostly held objects from the Baron's many trips to the African continent, so it was generally referred to as the African room. Other rooms being labelled the West Indies room and the Aboriginal room. The majority of the furniture consisted of high-backed Louis XV chairs and canopies in cream chintz. But the coffee table was a wooden elephant carrying a glass plate on its back, and there were a number of rackety stools, carved antelopes, and naked ebony statues, reminiscent of his expeditions into dark Africa. The floor was carpeted with Persian rugs, but here and there the skin of a lion or a tiger had been thrown on top of them. Trophies from his safari trips, oval ancestor portraits were juxtaposed with spears, knives, and other primitive weaponry. It was chaotic, personal, liberal. Agnes feared it gave her guest quite a glimpse into her unusual background. In a room upstairs, a violin abruptly stopped playing, and a little later, voices could be heard coming closer. Alan rose to his feet, thereby hitting his head against one of the low-hanging candelabras. "You're okay?" He nodded, rubbing the crown of his head. Damn height. Never seemed to get used to it. At that moment, the Baron entered, with Madame Petit on his heels, followed by a maid carrying a tray with glasses and a carafe filled with amber-coloured sherry. Her father, although of modest height, at least compared to Alan, managed, as always, to immediately fill the room with his presence. It was not that Baron Maximilien de Saint-Aubin was a remarkably handsome man, nor very imposing, but there was a quality in his posture, a mixture of what Alan had called old blood, and a personal artistic freedom that made certain no one overlooked him. It was in the way he moved, elastic like a cat, yet aristocratic in his uprightness. The elegant movements of his arms derived from a lifelong practice as a musician, and the ease with which he carried himself, confident but never completely in tune with protocol and decorum. He had the creaseless olive-coloured skin from his Spanish mother and the silver-streaked hair and honey-brown eyes of his late father. The 6th Baron de Saint-Aubin. His clothing was always of good quality and often had a colourful, eccentric twist. Today, he was wearing embroidered Persian babouches, simple charcoal flannel trousers with a clear fold in them, and a dark blue pullover under which the collar of his white chemise, with the invariably colourful silk cravat tucked in. A broad smile spread over his moustached face as he approached them, and it was typical of the Baron that he first went over to his daughter to plant a kiss on her fair forehead and compliment her on her loveliness before turning on his heels and greeting their guest. Agnes knew why he did this. To make clear that any man who might be interested in her would have to deal with the father first. But it embarrassed her, as it was rude to Alan, who after all was her professor. And since she was 23, there was really no reason for him to treat her as a little girl. "Ah, Professor Bell. Agnes has told me so much about you, glad to finally make your acquaintance." He shook Alan's hand cordially, and then seated himself in one of the Louis XV armchairs, putting one knee over the other and rearranging the flannel crease so it went straight over his knee. Alan sat back down on the couch. Agnes noticed an uncertainty in him she had not seen before, and she inwardly cursed her father. He made a habit of making other people feel smaller than needed. While the maid handed round glasses, she decided she would come to the point straight away, so Alan did not need to stay in her house any longer than he probably wanted. "Papa, Alan, Professor Bell is here for a reason, as you might have guessed." Her father took a contemplative sip from his glass and set it down on the side table before looking up at her. "Alan?" he asked in mock surprise. "Oh, I see. Yes, of course. You have been working together for so long it is probably appropriate by now." And turning to Alan, he added, "You're American, are you?" "Yes, sir, originally from Chicago, but I moved to Paris in 1910 after graduating from Harvard Medical School, summa cum laude." "Ha," Agnes thought, "you know how to deal with my father. You're one up on him." But she remembered Alan had told her that he wanted to see her fight 2 men. So before her father could further digress on a topic of Americans versus Europeans, she interrupted. "Papa, this is not a polite visit. It has a specific purpose. I want to ask your permission for something." "Fire away, my darling." Alan has decided to leave the American hospital in Paris to work closer to the front. I want to go too. The Baron took another sip from his glass, biding his time, and Agnes was curious to see which angle he would take. He cleared his throat and, fixing his brown gaze on Alan, calmly remarked, "Noble decision. I'm all for it. Where exactly are you going?" "I was thinking of the American Base Hospital No. 5, in the Pas-de-Calais, but I have been invited to several others." The Baron nodded. "You must have been. With your expertise, they'll be lining up for you. Sad business, this war. Only engineers and doctors seem to benefit from it, making one invention after the other. Still, all these novel ideas will come in useful in peacetime, no doubt." He sighed, and Agnes waited. "Listen, Professor Bell, I'm not at all involved in warfare. I do my humble bit at the Ministry of Food Supplies and in supporting Clemenceau, that sort of thing, but that's about as far as my knowledge goes. However, my good friend Count Horace de Dragoncourt, Agnes here knows him too, is the French ambassador in London, and he also owns a chateau near Amiens that has been turned into a Red Cross hospital. His eldest children, slightly older than my girl, are in charge, although they aren't doctors. Just yesterday, I received a letter from Horace, complaining they are desperately short of surgeons, which isn't surprising, I suppose." The Baron gave a scornful laugh and took another sip before he continued. "Well, you see, if you're not damned set on going to be with your fellow countrymen at the Pas-de-Calais, you could consider taking a look at Dragoncourt instead. It would give you the extra bonus of visiting one of the greatest French Renaissance chateaux, though, by deuce, what's left of its splendour is anybody's guess." The Baron's face darkened, and Agnes knew he was thinking of their own castle in Picardy. Alan asked, "How many beds do they have?" "My dear chap, I have no idea, but I can find out for you." This was Agnes's chance to interrupt. "If Alan decides to go to Dragoncourt, would you let me go as well?" The Baron shifted his legs, placing the other knee on top, and now started studying the crease. When he looked up again, his voice was composed and friendly, but held an undertone of alarm. "You're safer here, and you know why." "No, Papa, I am not." Her voice sounded shrill. "I'm not afraid, and I have nothing to hide." The Baron glanced at Alan, who was observing both father and daughter, and he added hastily, "I don't see a way around it, my sweet girl." Agnes rose, her lips pressed together, lacing her delicate thin fingers in front of her stomach until her knuckles showed white. "I'll let Alan out, but you know, Papa, that we intended to turn Chateau de Saint-Aubin into a front-line hospital before it was seized by the Germans, so I don't understand your objection now." In all honesty, she had to admit she did understand, but what was safe these days? Nothing. Both men rose as well, Alan carefully avoiding the candelabra. The Baron shook his head wearily. "I would have joined you too at de Saint-Aubin, Agnes darling, but there's no way I could accompany you to Dragoncourt. That's the difference." Agnes looked hopefully to Alan. Would he come to her rescue? But she saw he would not. She had lost the battle, and with it she had also lost him. "You'll be okay, Agnes," Alan said consolingly, as they stood on the steps outside her front door. Agnes wrapped her arms around herself, chilled and defeated. Alan looked so distinguished in the city's evening lights, yet so unattainable. She felt like running up to her room to sob on her bed, but she restrained herself. "Will I see you before you leave?" "Of course. I won't be leaving until the end of the week. Now cheer up, Dr. de Saint-Aubin. You've got your whole future ahead of you." "Do I?" Then he did something he had not done before. He grasped her hand and shook it, with the feel of his capable surgeon hand in hers, so warm and strong she could not but smile. And he smiled back. Returning to the sitting room, she found her father hiding behind his newspaper, Le Petit Parisien. "Alan will be wondering if we're covering something up," she said bitterly. "No, he won't. He understands I'm protecting you. And if you ask me, he's doing exactly the same." You are always so righteous, Papa. But this is wrong. I want to be where I'm needed most." "You are where you're needed most, mon enfant."